And with that, I'd love to kind of pass it to Alex to do a quick introduction of herself. Alex, I'd love to kind of start with like learning a little bit more about your journey. You started off in the UX space, pivoted into product, and now you're back into the UX space. So can you talk a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, totally. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. Yeah, so where to begin? I mean, I could give you like the full rundown, especially if anyone's curious about like what I studied in college and like how I got my first UX job. But definitely like that point where I was doing research, switched to product management, then went back to research is pretty interesting for me too. So I can kind of share what that was like. So I was working at a company called Meetup, which some of you may have used to find this event, but it's a platform for finding local groups and events. The company was based out of New York, has a super exciting mission that I was really excited to get behind. So I joined the company as a UX researcher. And for the first 6 months, that's kind of what I did. Like I did some small projects, usability studies, interviews, but then also had the chance to work on a bigger, longer term project to kind of think about Meetup's strategy in the long term and how they were going to make money. And it took place over a whole summer. I got to work with some really great and smart partners on that. And I think working on that project really pushed me towards wanting to try product management. I felt like I got to be more part of sort of the product strategy, thinking about how we would roll out new features and like financial modeling, and like these skills were not something that I had done as a researcher before, but it kind of piqued my interest. And so I was lucky enough at Meetup to take like an online product management course paid for by the company, where I learned a lot about kind of like the theories and frameworks that product managers use. And then I got to do like a bit of shadowing of existing PMs at Meetup, and then eventually transitioned to be the product manager at the company. And that was like such a cool opportunity. I feel like so lucky that I got to have that internal mobility, and I like recommend that to anybody now who is trying to try out something new. But yeah, I was product manager for about a year. I got to lead some work for both Meetup organizers and members or people who attend events. Um, Learned a lot doing that and got to know a lot of people across the functions at the company, marketing, engineering, legal, trust and safety, like customer service. And I loved building all those relationships. But what I really missed was actually doing research. And so I started looking for opportunities that were back in a research role. And I happened to find one at Etsy, which is where I'm at now. And now that I'm back doing research, I think that I'm really reminded of what I love about it. Like, I get to deal with all of this like kind of messy qualitative data and make sense of it and be able to tell a story and turn it into action for my teams, which is just kind of fun for me. I think it really stretches my brain. I get to think about big picture, longer term strategic questions that maybe like a PM wouldn't have as much time to think about in their day-to-day life. And what I like is that I still get to work cross-functionally with all of these different people that I kind of got to know as a PM. As a researcher, I still find opportunities to cross paths with these people and figure out how we can work together. So I I love it. I mean, I kind of like that I still get to work in this product space and solve problems for people, but I get to approach it from kind of like the research side of it.
And so, Alex, what does your typical day really look like as a UX researcher? And how is it so different from a product manager in the past?
Yeah. I think that like the biggest difference I notice is that I have fewer meetings as a researcher. And I also have more time to really like put my head down and do my work. A lot of my time in a day spent as a PM was meeting with other people that I work with, trying to unblock work for other people,
Yeah.
aligning across teams with leadership, et cetera. And while that still is part of my time as a researcher, it's definitely less of it. So like a typical day for me means, signing online, checking my Slack, email, reading documents that people have sent me, while it's still kind of quiet and no one is bothering me yet. Um,
Yeah.
and then I'll usually have like a team stand up where I'll check in with, what my PM is doing, design, even engineers, kind of what everyone's up to. And then today, for example, I attended a meeting that's hosted by the design team at Etsy where they give these really short lightning talks about all the projects that they're working on. And that's kind of a nice moment for me to just eat my lunch and then kind of get the spiel on what's happening across the company. So I really enjoy attending those. Later in the day, I'll either have like some, heads down work hours where I'll either like, knock out a study that I'm launching on user testing, or I'll like write an interview guide for a study that I'm running next week or something like that. I might have like a quick coffee chat with someone new. I did that today. We had a new hire join our team. So just saying hi and getting to know her was like a little pause in my day. And then towards the end of the day today, I attended a crit with my research team to kind of talk about the work that we're doing and if others have any feedback on materials that we're putting together or our research approach. And I really like moments like that because one of the reasons I wanted to work at Etsy was because the research team is so big. And I really felt like I could learn a lot from other people. And the size of the team is something that I hadn't yet experienced at my other two jobs. So I love that we have like these little crits during the week to do that.
No, that's awesome. I know we've spoken a lot of times before and we've done a session with you, but really the reason I wanted to talk about your transition specifically from UX to product back to UX is because I think it's important for a minute to kind of demystify the glamorous side of being a product manager and, just kind of focusing on what you like doing versus, just kind of being so one track mind about product, product, product. Uh, Even for me, like I moved from product marketing to product and I've been working in this space for a while now. But honestly, I think my first love is still product marketing. And that's totally cool, right? Like, and that's exactly why I really wanted to talk about. And this is a great segue into kind of talking about career progression. Having worked in UX and product, what do you think the career progression for anybody who's had that experience in UX, like whether it's a designer, researcher, writer, what are some lateral, career moves or just upward career moves that one can kind of explore?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to some ways that I have seen careers progress both inside UX, but then also laterally, like you said.
Yeah.
So first, what I've observed when it comes to like inside UX is that there is often a moment where you have to decide whether you want to stay an individual contributor or become a manager. So like for me, this might look like being a senior researcher now, but is the next step that I want to be a staff researcher, which is like the next level as an IC, or what I want to start manager training and like unpacking what that's like. And so I think those two tracks kind of diverge at like this particular point that I'm at right now and become two kind of different career paths. I can share that for myself. I had thought about what it might be like to be a manager. But I went through this really interesting exercise with my own manager where she had me journal for like a quarter and kind of write down the things at work that energized me and the things at work that depleted me. And we kind of matched up those activities with like the responsibilities of a manager and the responsibilities of an IC. And that was really helpful because I realized that a lot of the things that deplete me at work, like meetings, being like the middle person between other people, like those are things that managers love to do and like find a lot of energy from doing. And so I think that kind of helped me reframe what I want from my career. So I think within UX, those are two ways to progress. Laterally, I've also noticed that there are adjacent roles that are really good to go into. So obviously within product, there's design and product management. But I also think outside of that, I'm learning more about what market researchers do at Etsy, since our research team combines market and product research. I think that's a really interesting sort of pivot if you want to stay within research, but do different kinds of research. I also think that customer success is an interesting type of role because it's still very client facing, relationship building oriented, and largely about solving problems for people. And so that might be like another lens to take on like the customer or product focus that you have in UX. And then lastly, something interesting I've been thinking about lately is actually journalism. especially for researchers. This might not be like a move you would do from research into journalism, but maybe more so journalism into research, because I think some of the work they do with interviewing, storytelling, being compelling communicators, a lot of that work is mirrored, I think, in my own. And so I like to throw that out there in case anyone is thinking about it.
No.
But I also actually really wanted to go back to what you said earlier about like the glamour of being in product. I was definitely, that's what I assumed it would be like. Like I thought being a product manager would mean that I get to make all the decisions and like I'm in charge. But that was so not what it was like. And it was really challenging because like as a PM, I felt like I was constantly taking in all of these different inputs and like sources of information and trying to make a balanced decision. And it was so hard, not glamorous at all. And like so much of the job is also very like in the weeds, tactical, trying to like move stuff forward for engineers and whatnot. So yeah, I think definitely like the wool was pulled from my eyes or whatever the phrase was after doing it.
No, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And absolutely, I completely want to have this entire session dedicated to demystifying product. And it's a long conversation to have. But Alex, there are a bunch of questions that are coming in, and I want to make sure we're sprinkling that information here as well, or the questions as well. There's one which is from Carrie, which is how large is your team at Etsy, and what's your educational background?
Yeah.
Tell them what your educational background is, Alex.
So I studied psychology at Princeton. And while I was there, I also took some courses around like anthropology, design thinking, entrepreneurship, which I think kind of helped give me a glimpse into what working in UX might be like. I remember, like, obviously, psychology and the social sciences have a lot of application to the UX field because so much of it is about identifying attitudes, behaviors, studying them, like in a research setting. And so I thought a lot of those skills were transferable, but I also really loved my classes on like, you know, this is the design thinking process. We learned about the IDEO, like double diamond, and got to do a project at school about it. And like that stuff was really great. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to take classes like that. So that's my education background. I don't have any like further degrees than just my bachelor's. And then as far as the team at Etsy, I think right now we're somewhere between 20 and 30 researchers. And that includes both product research and market research.
Awesome. No, thank you. Speaking about education, I think it's really important for us to talk about like boot camps that, and it's also taking a moment to recognize that there are close to 2.3 million women who kind of left the workforce because of COVID. Now, for anyone who's like left the workforce for, due to COVID or just kind of taken a break for other reasons, what is one way to kind of get into UX without having a professional degree? Like, do you have any suggestions of how someone can break into UX without having a degree or having any professional course under their belt?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple different scenarios that you might find yourself in. So I'll start with one that I was in, approaching product management. I was already working at a company, but I was doing a different type of role and I was interested in something else. And internally, I was able to start conversations around making that move, which then led to the company supporting me in taking online courses, shadowing, and then eventually joining that team as like a junior or associate PM. And I think that is such a great way to try something new. I was recently talking with someone about this idea of internal mobility, and we were saying how like at a bigger tech company or really just a bigger company in general, they might have a more concrete process for internal mobility. So you might find yourself like very supported as you go through that process, like that you can look to other people who have done the same thing and kind of follow their path, but that you might encounter more bureaucracy or more like obstacles in your way to changing teams. Or you could be in a situation where it's a smaller company and you like naturally already are able to like wear different hats and like pitch in on different teams just because you have to because the company is so small. So like, you know, as a PM or as a researcher, maybe you have a chance to like pitch in on someone else's tasks and kind of learn what they do as a way to slowly move your way over to that team, even if you don't have experience in that field. So internal moving, that's one thing. I think that if you are like a career switcher, maybe, I think, you know, I talk to a lot of people who do boot camps and find them to be very helpful as a way to get like an entry level role somewhere, associate role, research coordinator role, internships, things like that. And I think that that's a very viable path if you have the funds to do a boot camp, which I know a lot of people don't. So I think that like the third path is if you can't take advantage of resources at your company or an expensive boot camp. First, there are a lot of free learning courses out there. I've definitely taken classes on LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, whatever, just to like brush up on random things that have to do with my job. And I find those to be really great. I do a lot of reading. So when I was early in my first job, I did a lot of reading on the Nielsen Norman blog, a lot of Medium articles like the UX Collective blog. And then more recently, I found some great stuff on even like the usertesting.com blog and like the DScout blog. There's so many free online resources to just read through if you have the time. And I also love just like talking to people about their experiences and their career paths and whether they have any advice for me. Because not only is that like a connection with someone who could help me down the road, but also a way to like just get more color on what that job is actually like that I want, you know, because like we've been saying, you might have this picture of the job that you want, but you don't really know what it's like until you talk to someone who's doing it or you do it yourself. And so I think those conversations are really eye-opening and helpful. The last thing I'll mention is not something I've ever tried, but is something that was suggested to me when I was younger and trying to get into the UX field, which was taking on pro bono or volunteer work with organizations in my community. So like, one example, during last year, COVID pandemic, there were a ton of local Chinese restaurants in my hometown who had no way for people to order food from them online and could no longer have people come into their restaurants. So I noticed lots of young people in my area like building websites for these restaurants and like helping them set up their delivery system so that they could survive. And I think projects like that are really interesting ways to like flex your UX skills, your problem solving skills, working with like a client or a stakeholder skills. Like those are all really, I think, great comparative UX experiences that you would have on the job.
Yeah, and I'd like to add just one more thing. I think another point that would definitely be helpful is to kind of perhaps just reach out to a mentor to kind of build on your skills. And I must kind of plug in that Alex has very generously offered her office hours on our mentorship network, which I'm going to put into the chat box right now. So for any of you who want to kind of, pivot into UX, you can definitely reach out to her. I just put the link there so you can grab some time with her and talk to her. We also kind of have a bunch of other mentors there. So mentorship is definitely another way to kind of develop your skills. So definitely check that piece out. We do have a bunch of questions coming in, but Alex, I do want to take a moment to talk about salary ranges, right? Like for anyone who's in the early career, mid career, advanced career, perhaps whatever you can kind of share, how much can someone really expect getting into a UX role as someone who's just starting off their career? And I do want to add something on here versus product. A lot of times, people are like, oh my God, as a product manager, I'm going to earn like a whole lot more. But let's just talk about this for a second, and talk about what you like doing versus how much time you're going to be. Yeah, so any information on that?
Yes. Oh, so much to say. Okay, so first of all, I love that we are even talking about salary because I think that it just needs to be more normalized. We need to be sharing our salaries with each other, even if they're ranges, so that people understand what they're worth and they can ask for it. So I will share based on my personal experiences. These are not like Etsy salary ranges, which I'm of course not allowed to share. Whatever, I'm just telling you what my experience has been. And these are base salary ranges. So in my first UX job, I was making between $60,000 to $80,000 a year as my base salary, which included like a small raise right before I left. In my second job, it jumped up. I was making between 100 to 120K per year. And then in my third and current job, it jumped up again, or I'm now making between 130 and 150K. So I'm like I've definitely noticed, right, that when I jump jobs, I make significantly more. It's been so much harder for me to negotiate raises inside a job that I already have. But besides like my one sort of proof point, resources that I've used to like kind of gauge my salary, obviously Glassdoor, PayScale, LinkedIn Salary, that site called like
FYI.
levels.fyi or something, which I will admit is not great for researchers because they just don't put that much information in, but can be helpful to compare to like design or product management. And then recently, the H-1B website, you can see what other folks on H-1B visas are being
I
paid
like that you say that.
because they make it public information. And related to that too, I recently learned that Colorado as a state has mandated that you have to disclose the salary if you're hiring in Colorado. So that's a fun tip if you're applying for a company and they happen to be hiring in Colorado. They will have to put the salary on the job role. So you can always double check against that.
Oh wow, I didn't know some of those resources. So thanks for sharing that. And BiPi is like, yeah, H1B website's really useful. Local people who are actually using the H1B website to figure out salary ranges. No, but
That's
that's
funny.
amazing. Any interview tips for negotiation specifically? What are the areas that one can actually negotiate? Like I know people have spoken about your PTOs, your work from home, remote situation, anything out of the ordinary that you've heard of in your experiences or within your networks that you can kind of reiterate, share here, just so we all are on the same page with that.
Yeah. I have never had much luck negotiating benefits like that. Anything like PTO, professional development budget,
Yeah.
um, remote working, things like that. Those often feel like policies that are set by the company for the entire group of employees. So it's hard to negotiate that on an individual level. At least that's what I've noticed. I mean, I think that maybe sign on bonus, is that something that people negotiate commonly? That's something that I always ask for, because sometimes the recruiter is very adamant on the base salary or equity, can't move there, but they like could give me a one time sign on bonus. And that has been helpful. It's not the same as getting an increase to the salary, but it works. And actually, it especially came in handy for me when I was switching between my first two jobs because I had to pay back some money to my first job,
Cool.
for
Wow.
relocation. And so I was able to get the company I was joining to cover some of that I had to pay back. So sign on bonus could come in handy there.
That's very interesting. But here are a couple of things that I have seen as well from like some of my networks. Is first year sign on bonus, second year sign on bonus, equity, stock, increase, yeah, cash bonus, PTO, relocation packages, work from anywhere, work remotely. What else? Side hustle contracts. Yeah,
Mm,
people are open to that stuff now. Especially after the pandemic, it's just something that you can talk about. But again, it's kind of rare to your point. But I'm glad we're talking about these things because until recently, I just feel like it's just been such a cryptic kind of situation where people talk very little about.
yeah.
Um, awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Alex. And then kind of pivoting into skills. I think there are a lot of questions which are coming in about skills.
Mhm.
What are some skills that you think are must-haves to succeed in a UX role? And how can one kind of know that me as a person, I'm going to do well in UX? And what are some skills that can be learned on the job? And do you have any suggestions for books, podcasts, anything else? Yeah, resources.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm a big believer that almost everything can be learned on the job. And I say that because I remember reading a lot of job descriptions when I was applying for jobs early on that listed all of these skills, all of these like responsibilities and traits that they were looking for. And I would look at it and be like, I think I can do that, but I don't know for sure. Like I don't have a ton of experience doing all of those things. Apply anyways, because you really will pick up a ton of those things once you're actually in the role. And so many of the skills that you would need as a researcher, like how to work with stakeholders, for example, is often specific to the role that you are taking and the team that you're joining, and you'll need to adapt to that. So that's just my plug. These skills are important to have, but even if you don't have all of them in a job description, apply anyways. So I will share a few things that I think are maybe inherently needed, especially for someone who's early in their UX career. So the first is that you should be someone who seeks out problems and ways to solve them. And you should be especially interested in asking questions to understand why something is the way that it is, not just how it is or what it is or whatnot, right? Like you have to really want to dig deeper to understand what's happening. The second is around communication skills. I feel like communication is something that you can learn in any setting, not necessarily professional. And so it can be picked up in just your everyday life, right? Like I think that expressing your ideas clearly and logically is so crucial to being in UX, doing any job really, but like really comes out for research especially. I think something that you might learn once you have more experience is how to adapt your communication style to the situation that you're in. So you would kind of adapt it based on the person that you're talking to, the medium that you're communicating with. Like, are you talking on Slack? Are you emailing? Are you on a call? Like, being able to kind of moderate that based on the scenario is something that you might learn over time. But as a baseline, you have to be able to express yourself and you have to be an active listener in conversations. The last thing that I think is really important, especially for junior people, is being really aware when you don't know something. Like if you don't have enough information or enough knowledge to move forward, you know when to ask for help, and you like recognize that there are other people who can give you the information that you need or at least support you along the way. And you're really open to getting feedback from people and learning from your mistakes. I think having that adaptability and like curiosity, eagerness to learn is always a great trait and something that people will often look for when they are hiring new teammates.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And let's kind of switch gears and talk about the interview process itself. What are some tips you suggest, like for anyone who's kind of going through the interview process? Do you need a portfolio? What are some resources one can kind of use to prep for their upcoming interviews? Any tips there?
Yes. I think portfolios are kind of maybe contentious. I was also talking about this with someone through SuperPeer actually about whether they needed a portfolio or not. And I will just share that like I don't have a portfolio for research. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I have not needed it for the last two jobs that I applied. Instead of sharing a link to a portfolio, I offer to share my work in one of the interviews as part of the process, right? Like either present a case study or show
Yeah.
them some examples of like presentations or reports that I've written in the past as a way for them to kind of gauge like the quality of my work. And that's worked for me. I think it's very different for designers. I think it's pretty much required for UX designers to have a portfolio. At least I see them all over the place whenever I have to interview designers or talk to people who are interested in getting into design.
Yeah.
So that feels like, oh, you definitely want to have all those materials in place before you start the interview process, because once it gets going, it's a lot of work. You will probably not have time to like put these things together while you're in the middle of an interview process. At least that's been my experience. So definitely recommend preparing those ahead of time. The other thing that I like to prepare that I'm actually happy to share with this group over email later is like a list of questions that you're going to ask in the interview, and try and think sort of deeply about who you're interviewing with. Is it going to be your hiring manager? Is it a peer? Is it a stakeholder that you'll work with? And ask them questions that get to the root of like, how are we going to work together? How am I going to know if I'm successful in this role? What are the challenges that you face? Things that go a little bit further than just like, what's your day-to-day like? Or what do you like about your job? Because I think those questions are nice, but you want the questions to benefit you too. So you want to ask like the harder questions that are going to really tell you what working on that team is like. And if you can spot any red flags ahead of time. So I definitely recommend having a good list of questions to ask. And again, I can share that. I can share mine anyways, because I have a lot.
That's awesome. And so there's a question which came in about your preference, or like, kind of working between a small size company or a larger size company. And you have experience working for Meetup, which is not really a small company, but like smaller perhaps as compared to Etsy. Any views on that? Like, especially for those who are trying to pivot into UX and then, moving from a completely different work stream or a different org into UX, like, and facing rejections. Like, what, like, would you say that it's a good idea to kind of network within the organization, shadow them, and then trying to slowly pivot into UX? Like, what's your view on that?
Mm. Mm, I think that my personal preference, if I had to do it again, would be to get into a company with a role that I think I can do right now, and then make my way over to the role that I really want. I just
Hmm.
like can't say enough good things about what I did at Meetup and how I would have never been able to get that, like, or it would have been so hard for me to get that first PM job somewhere else. And so being able to do it at a company where I already knew everyone, I already was familiar with the product, and I was comfortable, there were just fewer variables changing, right? Like when I switched to a new role. So that is my ideal situation, I think. I know it's not feasible for everyone, but like that's my preferred method of trying something new or getting into a new field. Um, what was the other question you had asked?
Facing rejections, like,
Oh,
let's talk about facing rejections. Like, how many?
yeah.
Okay, let's take it. Let's talk about before you actually got into Etsy. How many applications did you actually put in? Because I feel like, everybody around me, or like when I'm actually going through a job search period, everybody around me is getting a job, and I'm like, hey, I just like dropped 100 applications and nothing really worked out.
Oh,
Let's talk about.
yeah. So many, more than I can count, like across the last several years of me working, like I've gotten so many no's, and also so many companies that just ghost you and don't even tell you whether it's a yes or no. That's the worst. Um, but so many. And I think that, well, I can share one story. So when I was in this last job search where I got this job at Etsy, I was also interviewing at another company. I was interviewing at Spotify. And I got the interview. It was my first real, like, research structured, like case study type interview, because the previous roles that I had didn't have as structured of an interview process as that. So I was going into it, I prepared a little bit, but not that much. I went into the call and the interviewer started giving me this hypothetical scenario of like how they were going to roll out this new product in a new market. And like they wanted me to walk me through my research plan for this scenario. And I was totally caught off guard. I had like I was not prepared with like a framework in my head of how I would approach the problem. I hadn't read enough blog articles about how you solve this kind of problem in an interview. And I just kind of like bumbled my way through it and obviously got a no at the end of the day. But I think that process, that rejection was really, really helpful because I suddenly had a better understanding of what the interview was even like for a research role and what materials I need to prepare ahead of time and what frameworks I need to know ahead of time and like all of this stuff. So even though that was a no, I was like, oh, good thing I got that no then and not later for like a job that I really, really wanted. That was great. But yeah, the no's are just, they happen. They're very frustrating and they're often like nothing to do with you, right? Like there are
Yeah.
situations that happen at companies that are outside of your control. Like maybe an internal person got the job or they had started hiring for it months before you applied and like we're already super far in the process with someone else. Like that has no bearing on who you are
Absolutely.
and like the qualities that you would bring to a job. It's just something that you
Yeah.
can't control. So you have to persist. It's really hard. I know it is, but you have to keep going. And then one day the right company will be the right fit for you.
It truly is. I think it's a journey, it's a process. And again, I think that's one thing that we are at Products by Women are trying to solution for, everything, every job that you see on our community board are real people within our community. So the job that you see from Huge for a product manager is my team. And that means your resume is going to go to my team member, and that increases your chances of actually getting a job through referral. And I do want to stress on referral based hiring, because not just with Products by Women, but just anywhere. I think that's just the right approach, because let's say you actually put out like 100 applications, the chances are that your resume is really going into a black hole. Let's be honest, because for every one job that's being posted, there are like 1,000 people who are applying for it. So you have to stand out from the crowd. With that, I mean, Alex, any resources that you highly recommend for UX jobs?
A few. I mean, I have recently been loving Slack workspaces as a way to find out what the job postings are. So there's Products by Women, of course. There's also another one I'm in called Women in Tech.
Yeah.
And then there's another research specific one called Research by Learners, which I recently joined. And they also
Mhm.
post jobs in there all the time. So I think these Slack workspaces are great to just join and kind of passively see what's going on. Um, I also noticed the LinkedIn algorithm, whatever it is, they're always boosting these like, hey, I'm hiring at my company or my team, like come work with me. Those types of posts are always in my feed. So I'm always scrolling on, I was always scrolling on LinkedIn when I was looking for jobs because I knew I'd find something there. And like there was some chance that the person who posted it was connected with me. So I
Yeah.
loved it for
Oh,
that reason.
that's interesting. I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, whether it's Products by Women, whether it's the workspaces, definitely explore this avenue of reaching out to people and asking them if they'd be willing to kind of chat with you, refer you internally, put your resume in the right hands. Because trust me, those chances of actually getting that job or getting a referral and potentially converting that is definitely a lot higher. And I'm also going to kind of drop our Slack community link right here for those of you who want to connect with other women in product, women in tech, women in data design, um, in the chat. So feel free to kind of connect there. So Alex, I mean, one last question really that I had before we kind of open it up in the next 20 minutes for one-on-one kind of speed networking session, which is how can someone connect with you? Is it on Instagram, LinkedIn, email? How?
Um, yeah, my Instagram, I just post like dog pictures, so probably not that, but LinkedIn is great. I will say that I very rarely will accept requests from people I don't know, but that doesn't mean that I won't respond to your message. The messages that stand out the most to me are ones that have a really clear ask in it.
Yeah.
So, what I don't love is getting messages that are like, can we just chat? Can I pick your brain? Like, do you have 3 minutes to hop on a call? If there's not a goal that you have or an intention
Yeah.
for our conversation, that can be as simple as like, I want a referral to Etsy. Great. We don't even have to have a call. I can just send you my link. That's totally fine. I'm like very appreciative of that kind of directness. Or it could be like, hey, I want to run my portfolio by you, or I want to share my resume with you. Great, that works too. But if it is more of like a, you don't really know what you want, like maybe that's okay. But I want the time to be best spent for both of us, and so it will be that if you're really clear about what you want from it. And to that note, if you do want to actually talk, SuperPeer is what I use now to book any sorts of calls. So Nanisha sent the link in the chat. That's the best place to schedule time with me. And that form, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's already built in with like a field that
Yeah.
asks why you want to meet. So that's perfect. You just pop your reason in there, and we'll be able to talk.
Awesome, thank you. And I do want to take a minute to see if there are any raised hands. Feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to unmute you and let you ask questions live with Alex before we do break into different rooms. Give it a minute. And while we're waiting here, let's talk a little bit about some of the questions which are coming in. He came in earlier. which is
I see a quick one from Maureen about whether rejection blacklists you from applying to other roles with the same company. That's not something that I have noticed before. If anything, if you are not chosen for a role, the recruiter might pass your resume to someone else who they think you might be a good fit for. That's something I've noticed, right? It's like if a researcher at Etsy doesn't get hired for the role they applied for, we might see if there's another open role that's a better fit for them. So in my experience, no. But that's just my experience.
cool. We have a question asked to unmute. Anisha has a question. Anisha, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Alex and Amisha. It's first time for me in Meetup, and it was great listening to you. So currently, I'm nowhere near the UX field. So I'm currently doing PhD in biological sciences. So I like the psychology and the creativity part. So I am thinking of jumping to UX after completion of my degree. So because it's my research course, PhD is a, so do you think my like kind of the research skill, testing hypothesis, observation skill and communication part of my research now, is it transferable to UX when I take a bootcamp or course and apply for a junior role?
Totally. I think it definitely is. I even see research job postings that specify that you need a PhD to do it. So I think that you definitely will have transferable skills. I think that there are, the one big thing to keep in mind is that research that you do now might be very controlled, right? Like you're probably in a lab setting. Yes. And you have lots of control over the variables that you're testing. And that is just way harder to do when you're doing research with people, because you can't really control for like how they feel that day, which could impact what they tell you in a user interview. And so there's just more to account for when it comes to biases, like the way that people show up to a research setting. And like from your side, it's really just about acknowledging that and figuring out how to frame that to the people that you're working with so that they understand that your research is not like scientific research, you know? But honestly, it's a very logical step. And I think that UX research is fascinating. Like you get to learn so much about people and like the intricacies of the way that they are and like how they behave. And I just think it's really exciting work. So I think it's awesome that you are thinking about going into it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I guess we have another hand. Let's see. Who's that? Do you see who's raised their hand? I don't see it. There you go. That's me. Okay. Deepisha. Asked to unmute. Okay, you can unmute yourself, Deepisha.
Hi.
Hey.
How's everyone doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. So I actually have a hybrid background. So I have an HR and tech background, and I went to a full stack bootcamp. So I did a complete 360 pivot on my career about 2 years ago. And yeah, I definitely went through a lot of persistence for like 6 months to find a job, and, you know, I ended up getting one. So I'm in the engineering space. I do a little bit of back end right now, and also I've done front end development before through my bootcamp. And I also work on the product itself, just kind of testing and making sure it works. And I've been networking a lot with people in product and also in UX, and kind of trying to figure out what would be the best route. So this session kind of made sense for me to attend. So for someone who has, I guess, about like two and a half years of engineering background, like what is a good route you would suggest? Like, do you think product is a better route to try, or is it UX? Because for me personally, like I'm more interested in interacting with people, and just like based on my experience, I'm more interacting with people and kind of like giving guidance as to what works, what doesn't work from a user standpoint. I mean, because I've worked in HR, and I'm like, okay, this, you know, seems kind of good from a user's perspective. but I don't have a design background. So, you know, I think from like a technical standpoint, like, is it functional? So kind of curious to know like what you would suggest for someone with my kind of background.
It's a good question. I think that it sounds like you're not too deep into anything yet, that you could kind of pick whatever you want, which I think is a great place to be in. I think that engineering backgrounds actually are really helpful for product managers because so much work that PMs do is with engineers and like trying to plan against a roadmap and launch something that is built by engineers. So being able to speak their language or like understand the work that they do, how much effort it takes them to do it, what makes it hard or easy, like that is such valuable information that not all PMs have. So I will say that that could be really valuable if you decide to pursue product management. I think for UX, what you say about design is really true, right? Because like when you're a designer, you have to be able to design. And that is like a skill that you probably have to learn, take a course on, like spend a lot of time to figure out, self-teach yourself, which is hard and is one of the reasons why I don't think I would ever be a designer. But I think research is kind of an interesting field to consider for you because I think a lot of the skills can be learned on the job because so much of it is about communication, asking good questions, being able to like turn data into action. And then as far as like the harder skills of research, which are, you know, how to design a study and all of that stuff, like that can be gleaned through online resources or just by talking with people and practicing it. And to me, research has always felt like a lower barrier to entry than design. So those might just be things to consider. I feel like you can take either path. I would maybe think about either in your engineering role today or the HR role that you had before, like go through that same journaling exercise that I did with my manager. Like, what do you do at work that really energizes you? And what do you do at work that is not exciting to you and depletes you? And start to match that up against either job descriptions that you can find or with talking to people, what they say that their jobs are like.
Thanks. That was helpful. Thank you for that. I have a quick other question. So would you suggest there any like good startups to consider for someone who's kind of worked mainly in like the HR product space and like financial services space, like, but not necessarily wants to stay in that space, but you know, has that background, I guess, from before?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you have that experience. I mean, if you can bring a past experience of financial services, you could probably find your way into like a fintech startup. There are even like HR tech startups that I think are out there. The only one that's coming to mind is Lattice, which I've used in the past for like surveys and HR things and whatnot. But I think that's actually a great point. It's like if anyone out there is a career switcher, think about the industry that you came from and whether that gives you an advantage into the companies that you apply for now. Just because you didn't do UX at a previous job doesn't mean that you don't have a ton of industry experience that you can bring into a UX role in your next job.
Okay, thank you. And I requested you on LinkedIn, so just so you know that I'm not a stranger. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. I mean, we have about 10 minutes, and I do want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to meet each other just a little bit if it's not too much time. So we will break out for like around 10 minutes and then close out. I know there are a couple of more hands open, so hands up. And so we'll come back and we'll see if we have time. If not, we'll close out. But I'm going to open up the rooms, so feel free to say hi to each other. If some of you want to come back to the main room, that's fine too. Cool. See you in a minute. Hi. Hello, 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 hello. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hey, hi everyone. How's it going?
Hi there. It's going well. How's it going with you?
Good.
That's
Where
good.
are you joining us from?
I am calling from Houston.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not more sociable. I'm driving, and so I was listening in.
No worries at all. That's totally cool. I'm glad you were able to join. I hope it was useful for you to kind of tune in and learn a little bit about UX. Are you currently in UX or are you looking to pivot into UX?
I'm looking to pivot. I'm currently in a boot camp
Okay.
and just trying to maximize this learning and growing period and
Yeah.
a lot of meetups and meet people and gain as much
Awesome.
experience and insight outside of my coursework
Mm-hmm.
as I can. How about you? What is your background?
So I currently work in product, and so that's something that I do. And I'm also the founder of Products by Women. So it's something that I'm doing, and then and yeah, I do a bunch of things. So I'd love to kind of connect offline for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it, what made you decide to get into, what was it, product design?
No, so this community, Products by Women, is something that I founded, and I also work in product. I work in an agency. Outside of that, I do a bunch of other things like work in. I'm a Forbes contributor, and I do a few more other things. Yeah,
Oh, wow. Oh,
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Thank you, thank you. That's awesome. How did you discover this event?
Through Meetup.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
They require it of me in my boot camp curriculum to do a networking event. So I did
Oh,
this
nice.
one.
That's incredible. That's awesome. So which boot camp are you going to?
Thinkful.
Ah, nice, nice, nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, definitely check out our Slack community. I think it's a great way to kind of connect with other women in UX, and see if there's anything that stands out to you. We have a bunch of other UX events which are definitely coming up.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
definitely do that. Is there anyone else here? I don't mean to take up all the talk
Yeah,
time.
I know we didn't have too much time, kind of, for networking. So yeah, there are a bunch of other people. I'm gonna try and see if I can move you to another room so you get the opportunity to talk to a few more people.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a second. Let me see where I can. Huh. It's weird because it seems like. There you go.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
Um, So Naemisha, you're in product management currently.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and I was interested when Alexander talked about finding a job that you could do now with the skills that you have now, and then kind of move yourself up to UX design or
Yeah.
research. And I just
Yeah.
want to know, what kind of jobs do you see are parallel with UX research that kind of line up with that, so you could eventually get into it?
Yeah, I think with UX research, there are a bunch. Like, I mean, you can go into core research itself, right? Like, you can actually pivot from a research background into UX research as well. And I know
Mhm.
we're coming out in exactly 17 seconds, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to spend some time talking about this, or and also share more information. I know we should have probably put dedicated like 30 minutes for networking, but I'm sorry, but I'm happy to share more information with you offline for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. It was a great event. I learned a lot.
Awesome. Awesome. So is everyone back here with us? Alex, are you here?
Hi.
Awesome. So, Alex, I think in the interest of time, we have 3 minutes left. I think we probably didn't have enough time for networking because it's a lot of people in the room right now. It's probably not the most effective way. But I'd encourage everyone to reach out to Alex. Again, her Super Pure link, I shared it earlier, and we will be sharing that information in a follow up email along with the recording. It will become available on our YouTube channel as well. So reach out to her, reach out to me, connect with other women on our Slack community. And again, Slack. And Alex, thank you so much again for all your time. And this was definitely very informational.
Of course, I'm always happy to do this. Yeah, I'm just one person. There are so many like great people out there to talk to about all of this stuff. So, Naimisha, I love that you've created this community so that we can all do that with each other.
Thanks, Alex. And yeah, we'll stay in touch and see you all on Slack. Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Okay.